pretty informal, and we can crop it if need be. Hello, everyone.
Should we wait a few minutes for folks to join in?
Yeah, I think so. We
Okay.
got a pretty big group here, but I don't know how many more we have waiting. But
Actually, this might be all of us. Oh, Charlie's gotta grab water though. Let's give her a second.
don't want anyone to get dehydrated and um, pass out during the call. So,
No.
Hey, this is Stephen Collins from Puget Sound Energy. Just a heads up that I'll have to drop at 4 for pre-existing conflict.
Okay. Looks like Charlie's back. Let me go ahead and share the PowerPoint. Okay. Austin, do you want to go ahead and kick us off and introduce us?
sure. Yeah. I'll introduce myself and what I'm looking forward to today, and a little bit about how I view this work from a very high level, and then pass it off to Aaron to run through the material today. My name's Austin Scharf. I recognize a fair amount of you from prior CEIP work and other work that we do in the utility space. It's nice to see some new names, and I look forward to getting to know all of you. I work here with Aaron at the State Energy Policy Office on utilities and energy market issues, including implementation of the Clean Energy Transformation Act. I've been at Commerce for about 7 years now, and had the opportunity to be the rulemaking coordinator for the policy leads at the time when we wrote the rules for CETA here at Commerce. And I know the UTC has its own set of rules. And helped with the reporting template for the first round of CEIPs for the consumer-owned utilities. And that reporting template was very bare bones. It just kept with the rules that had come out of the rulemaking process, which had been quite contentious. And so we kind of stuck to the rules as they were written, and that's what utilities requested that we do. They didn't want anything more. And so we shared that out to folks, and folks reported back in, I believe it was 2022. And so now it is time to think about the how utilities are going to review their work over this interim performance period and how they will report that to Commerce. So while we're working with clean energy implementation plans, and it will be a tendency of mine to say, oh, the CEIPs, what we're really talking about is the performance and compliance reporting template today. And I had the benefit of compiling the CEIPs that we got back in 2022 and looking over those with our consumer-owned utilities. And then we brought the IOUs on board for one workshop to share their CEIPs at the time. And we really recognized the diversity of ways that people approach completing the CEIP and the different levels of understanding of what's required under each piece of the CEIP. It frankly will be a challenge, I think, for us to craft a performance and compliance reporting template that is really robust across the utilities because of the diverse approaches that they've taken, particularly for the equity sections. But I do think that we will get to a very streamlined reporting template that accounts for the different places utilities are at, whether they're small or big, whether they're a consumer-owned utility or an investor-owned utility, and that allows us to aggregate those into a very succinct summary and roll up for the state legislature and the public to have available. So with that, I really encourage folks to jump in to this work. Today, Aaron has got us lined up to do a lot of great thinking. And then around how we'll go back and look at the CEIPs and what utilities have done over the last 4 years. But also to think about after today's workshop about going back and looking at your prior CEIP submissions, what was all included there, and how you might begin, might begin answering and responding to questions about how the utility has implemented the CEIP over the last 4 years. Many of you have also participated in a new CEIP reporting template with Aaron and myself. And I think that template will really help us when we go to write the reporting template for the performance and compliance period between 2026 and 2030. So you might be caught in two different worlds. One, thinking about how am I going to write something with this kind of diverse reporting template that we had way back when versus writing it with the neat, clean reporting template that we have now if we had been implementing that. And I think through the next few workshops, we might end up with starting with the ideal template, which for performance and compliance, which would reflect, the metrics and different layout of the CEIPs that Aaron has put forward for this upcoming 2026 2030 planning period, and then modifying that to make adjustments and reflect the diversity that we have in the first CEIPs from 2022 to 2026. So with that, I will turn it over to Aaron, who's been doing a great job leading this work and will be leading our workshop today. So take it away, Aaron.
All right. And just a quick slide here showing that commerce works in other sectors as well as energy. This is part of our typical slide branding. But I'll go ahead and dive into the agenda. So today we'll discuss the group charter and timeline for the work. I'll give an overview of the reporting requirements and role. We'll reflect on the previous CEIP reporting cycle, and then we'll discuss potential solutions to performance and compliance reporting challenges. And before we dive into the work, I always like to start with some introductions. We have some new folks that weren't part of the CEIP advisory group. We have more folks on the investor-owned utility side, such as the Utilities Transportation Commission, Public Counsel, and we have the investor-owned utilities represented today. So let's go ahead and just do a quick round of introductions. And if you have an organization, please include that in your Zoom name as well if you haven't already, just so we know who you're representing. So I'll start off. My name is Aaron, and my preferred pronouns are he, him. I work for the Department of Commerce here as a data specialist. And one thing I'm really good at that most people wouldn't guess is that I can identify over 30 local bird species by sight and call. So that's a cool skill that I have from my wildlife conservation science days. And I'll popcorn Austin.
Switched over to a different room here. I'm Austin, he, him pronouns, also with the Department of Commerce. And what's one thing you're really good at that most people wouldn't guess? Um, I'm looking at a volleyball sticker here, and I'm not very good at volleyballs, but I am very good at ruining volleyball for everybody else because I cannot control that ball once I hit it. So good at ruining volleyball games. So if you ever want to go to a volleyball game and not participate, you should invite me, and we'll find something else to do. Um, Next on my list, I have Amanda at Avista.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Amanda Gehring with Avista, she, her, and I would say baking and cooking.
Thank
And
you.
I'll give it to Kelly.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear and see me. I'm joining from an iPad, which is a new experience for me. And I'm leading a Vista CEIP process as we speak. This requirement that we're talking about today, I just learned about a while ago. So it's all new to me. And I'm good at photography, but not a lot of people would know that. I can't see everyone else, but I know that Charlie's on the call, so I'm going to pick on Charlie.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlie Thompson, she, her pronouns. I'm a policy associate with Northwest Energy Coalition, or NWEC. And the people that know me know this. People that don't may find it surprising. I can probably kick most people's butts at Star Wars trivia. Love Star Wars. Yeah, you can ask me most things and I'll probably know it. And I will pass to who's next on my screen? Stephen Collins.
Hey, thanks, Charlie. I was fiddling with my Zoom settings. I'm like still trying to figure it out. I think I got it. What was the prompt again? I think I heard people's responses, but I missed the actual question.
Yeah, it's what's one thing you're really good at that most people wouldn't guess?
I don't think I'm good at that too much. Shoveling snow, maybe. Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, so I think that that helped a little bit. Hey, yeah, I'm with Puget Sound Energy. I'm mostly here to support Brian Tyson. I work in regulatory, and another fun fact: I used to work at the Department of Commerce in Minnesota before joining PSC. So it's nice to get to know everybody else. Happy to be here. I'll pass it to Brian, I guess.
All right. Thanks, Steven. Brian Tyson, I use he, him pronouns from PSC, working on the clean energy implementation plans. Good to see a lot of familiar faces here. One thing I'm good at, I'm not good at it anymore, but I was okay at snowboarding at one point, but I haven't gone in 5 years now, so I'm probably not really good anymore. Um, Pass to Tara.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Tara Maynard with Grays Harbor PUD. I would say, well, I don't know that most people wouldn't guess it if they know me well, but I'm really good at event planning, whether it be a small event or large to 500 to 1,000 people. So I love event planning, and if I could make that work financially, I would probably do that long term. But anyway, how about I pass it to Almaz?
Okay. I was struggling to find buttons. Hi everybody, Almaz with Tacoma Power. Something that I am good at, I'm gonna probably say baking. I'm really good at making healthier versions of guilty pleasures. And Rohini?
Hi, hopefully my mic works because Pacific Corp blocks Zoom all the time. Rohini Ghosh, Director of Clean Energy Planning at Pacific Corp, also in the midst of our 2025 planning cycle and gearing up for all of our CEIP related filings this year. One thing that I used to be really good at in college, so I have no proof that I'm still good at this, was foosball. I could really destroy people on the foosball table. So that used to be impressive. I think I see, is it Dever or Dever?
It's Dever, you got it.
Dever, okay.
Yep. Hi, I'm Dever Hafner-Ratliff. I'm filling in for Steve Taylor with Cowlitz PUD. My normal job right now is legislative session, so I apologize that I'll be multitasking. And I don't know that I'm necessarily good at it, but people are often surprised by how good I am at starting home renovation projects.
Yeah.
And then has Molly gone yet?
No, I haven't. This is Molly. I am an analyst for the UTC. I use she, her pronouns. And one thing I'm really good at is withstanding really cold water. I do pretty cold plunges pretty regularly. I think Grecia. I don't think you've gone.
I haven't. Hi, everyone. My name is Gracia or Grecia. I'm an environmental equity advisor at Seattle City Light, helping lead a lot of the CIP, like both the new one and the reporting from the last one. And I also wouldn't necessarily say I'm good at it. I'm pretty mediocre at like lifting. However, people tend to be surprised at how strong I am and always underestimate me when they see me trying to help out, but tend to be pleasantly surprised. So I'll throw that one in the loop. And I don't know if there's anyone left from what I'm seeing, but if you are left, feel free to stand out and speak.
I'll go ahead and go then. Yeah, this is G. Marie Dreyer with Public Counsel, she, her pronouns. And much like everyone else, I feel like I have to caveat with saying that the idea of being really good at something, it's hard to qualify, but I'm decently good at languages. I did Greek and Latin in college, and I did Spanish for many years growing up, and now I'm trying to teach myself French before I go on a trip to France in May. So, nice to meet you all.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for sharing. It looks like we have some cooks and some planners and some people who used to be good at sports that are no longer. We'll go ahead and get going on the group charter. So I'm going to share a different screen real quick. Pull that up. So for this group, we'll be discussing primarily the performance and compliance reporting for the Clean Energy Transformation Act. This rule applies to both investor-owned utilities and consumer-owned utilities, and I'll describe the rules in greater detail in a moment. The purpose is for this group to provide feedback and recommendations to Commerce on the consumer-owned and investor-owned utility performance and compliance for the greenhouse gas neutral standard and 100% clean electricity standard, reporting forms and materials. This includes constructive input on defining key terms, reporting guidance, and data collection. And all meetings are to be constructive and collaborative, with members being dedicated to advancing the intent of CETA to transition the state's electricity supply to 100% carbon-free by 2045 and ensure all customers are benefiting from the transition to a clean energy economy. So roles and responsibilities, I'm sure all of you are familiar with CETA statute, but we also have this rule here on performance and compliance reporting. You'll provide information on CEIP progress, advise Commerce on development of the reporting template and guidance, and recommend improvements, and also advise on defining key terms, guidance, additional materials that need to be provided. Also offer advice and solutions to issues or problems arising in the course of data collection. And if needed, we can have stakeholder or guest workshops as well. And the structure, we have a Department of Commerce, we have a public utility district representative, rural electric co-op representative, municipal utility, we have climate advocate, environmental justice advocate. We have the investor-owned utilities here, and we have the Utilities and Transportation Commission and Ratepayer Advocate Public Counsel. And so our meetings will be via Zoom, and we'll provide, we provided the meeting agenda ahead of the meeting, and we'll continue to do so. The timeline for our work is this first meeting. We're going to review the statute and rules, the charter, proposed calendar and timeline of work, identify challenging areas from the last CEIP reporting cycle, and discuss potential solutions. And then moving forward, we'll get feedback and review the draft materials and continue improving that over a course of 2 or 3 meetings. And if there's additional materials that you think would be helpful, besides the template, if we need like an additional guidance Word document or PDF to accompany that, then you can let us know as well. We did that for the CEIP reporting template, the newest one. And we also provided some additional materials. So yeah, this is our timeline. We'll probably have about a meeting per month, and hopefully have it done by have the final one by around May. And I'm gonna have to switch back to the PowerPoint. So as I mentioned, this requirement applies to consumer-owned utilities and investor-owned utilities to submit an interim performance report by July 1, 2026. There's another one, July 1, 2030, and every 4 years thereafter. And they must use a form provided by Commerce that includes the following information: compare specific targets with amount acquired or used during the period, explanation of variation from a specific target, and any intended actions to offset variation in the next period. The specific targets are the renewable resources and non-emitting electric generation used, and this is in megawatt hours and percent of retail load. There's also the conservation and efficiency used in megawatt hours, and demand response resources acquired in megawatts. And this is a continuation. There's also a requirement for identification of any resources subject to WAC 194-40-430, which is the new fossil fuel generating resource. The report also must demonstrate whether and how all customers are benefiting from the transition to clean energy. This includes results for each indicator established in the CEIP, an explanation of how specific actions are consistent, ensuring an equitable distribution of energy and non-energy benefits, an analysis of whether the forecasted distribution of benefits and reductions of burdens accrued or are reasonably expected to accrue for highly impacted communities, vulnerable populations, and all other customers. For each specific action in the CEIP, a summary of the actions taken and the results, as well as any other information necessary to demonstrate compliance with CETA that are applicable during the period. And there's also a requirement for describing the use of alternative compliance options or incremental cost provision. For incremental costs, the utility, if they plan on using the incremental cost compliance pathway, a documentation by year of the actual and lowest reasonable costs incurred during the period for the cost to comply with CETA. Documentation by year of the cost that the utility would have incurred to acquire the alternative lowest reasonable cost and reasonably available portfolio of investments. A calculation of the average annual incremental cost by summing the differences between the costs and dividing by the number of years in the period. And a comparison demonstrating that average annual incremental cost for the period equal or exceed the annual threshold amount. Alternative compliance is not applicable during this compliance period, so we'll skip discussion of that until the performance and compliance report in 2034. All right, so now we'll go on to our mural board discussion. And I'll have to switch sharing again. All right, so I just dropped a link to a mural board for you all. I'll go ahead and share my screen just for the Zoom recording, but I'd encourage everyone to actually visit the mural link so that you can engage in our collaborative discussion today and be able to add your thoughts onto the mural board. Because we'll be doing that in real time. I'll go ahead and just share this for the Zoom so it doesn't look like a blank screen in the recording. But so I'll just show right here on the left side are the rules again for reference. And then what we'll be discussing today is the previous CEIP reporting, what went well, what went poorly. And on the bottom half is what ideas we have to address some of the challenges and how we should take action moving forward. On the right side is a parking lot for ideas that might not fit neatly into those boxes. Just a quick tutorial for those who haven't used Mural before. If you want to write in a sticky note, you just need to double left click that sticky note. If you need more sticky notes of that color, you can hit Control C, Control V in order to copy a sticky note of the same color, or you just hold Alt and then drag it to the right or left and you'll create a copy. On the left-hand side, there's also a toolbar, so you can also create sticky notes that way if you left-click the sticky notes on the left. I think that's all there is to Mural Board. If you have any questions about how to do the technical aspects, let us know. And I'll hand it off to Austin now to kick off the discussion about the previous CEIP reporting process.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Aaron. I want to just take a moment and have us think about these first two sections in the mural, and without having our CEIPs open in front of us, just share a few things to me that as somebody who is far away looking at these plans and but also had the opportunity to work with folks who wrote the plans afterwards to look at and examine them. I think it's important to realize that there's a variety of ways in which people completed these plans, and that not everyone is in the same space and place or space but place in terms of what they put in their plans in the past, as well as what is really a feasible for each utility to implement. Puget Sound Energy has a lot more resources to throw at the clean energy implementation plan than, say, Grays Harbor. So we've got to recognize that from the get-go and recognize that what we put in, what went well and what went poorly might be different for everyone. There's probably a lot of common themes as well. I think, too, that these questions here are things that are very much speculative in the sense that we're getting together here to talk about them for the first time. I encourage everyone to take these questions with them and then go back and look at their CEIPs and further refine these. Let Aaron and I know what you learned, what you're thinking after you've taken a look at your CEIPs. But today, this is just kind of a spontaneous look at what went well, what went not so well, and then as Aaron will lead us through what issues do you have going forward to think about. So again, that is a very of the moment question, but you'll probably want to dwell on and will continue to dwell on throughout this work, as well as what should we do as a group to address some of these questions about gaps and areas that and ideas that we either need to address or would like to address throughout this process. So I'm going to leave it there and just extend an open invitation for folks to jot down what comes to mind first for them in these first two categories, the green and the pink. I think, Aaron, are you going to show them how to create more Post-its if they need?
Yeah, so I already walked through that. If you need to create more Post-its, go ahead and use Control-C, Control-V, or hold Alt and drag the Post-it to the right or left. And so I'll give you guys 5 minutes of independent brainstorming time. If you guys need more, I can give you more. But let's do 5 minutes of just independent brainstorming, answering these two first sections, the green and the red section. And then Austin will lead a discussion just going over what we talked about, the commonalities between the investor-owned utilities, consumer-owned utilities, the differences. And with that, I'll set a timer and let you guys go ahead and brainstorm. Feel free to write down your ideas. How are we doing? Do we need more time? Someone can thumbs up if they need more time. See, some folks are still wrapping up their thoughts.
Why don't you give us another 2 minutes, Aaron?
Okay. I'll give you guys a couple more minutes. Feel free to review what other people have put, and I've seen some people have already done this. You can add a reaction by clicking the bottom left, and you can put a +1 or a thumbs up just by clicking on the reaction. So you can do that as well. You can go through what other people have put down and just bump it up for attention or agreement. All right, how are we doing? Anybody need more time? Okay, well, I will pass it off to Austin to lead discussion and kind of go over the themes of that we're seeing here. Additionally, one thing that can be interesting to talk about is if you click on one of the sticky notes, if you left click on it, you can tag. So what we could do is if there are specific items that are COU specific or IOU specific, we can tag them and find patterns that are applicable to only one or the other. So I'm curious to hear if there are common challenges or successes that one group of utilities might have had versus the other, and where both might be kind of having common challenges or successes. With that, I'll just be taking additional notes and managing the chat while Austin leads the discussion here.
Yeah, thanks everyone for providing input. Feel free to add things again as we go through. You get any additional thoughts. This is really just a board for us to begin our conversations and helps us structure the workshops to come. And the green post-its for what went well. To me, the common theme here seems to be the interim clean energy targets. Now, my assumption here when I read these is that the interim targets are around energy efficiency, demand response, renewable energy requirements. For most folks are pretty clean to report on. You can quantify them relatively easy. They're in the traditional utility energy wheelhouse for reporting. So that's it's good to see people recognizing that. The other there's two other sticky notes here that kind of fall outside of those. One is a sticky note from maybe it's from Spider, maybe Spider has it locked. I don't know. I don't know how to read Mural, but one is about the process of thinking through the utilities' decisions and impacts on often overlooked customers. And the other one here seems specific to a utility in that says Named Communities Investment Fund, which might be, I think it's a Vista who ended up establishing a fund by this name, but
Yes.
to be able to go through that process and come up with a specific action and perhaps be able to follow through on it. I think that is identified there, and I think some folks will be able to say, yeah, we did that one thing that we said in our CEIP, and I wouldn't be surprised if others are like, don't know what we put in our CEIP, given changes in staff and everything else. So those are some of the themes I saw there. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in there or elaborate on these or anything else that went well. If not, we'll jump over here to the pink ones. I'm seeing a lot of different thumbs up here. So keep adding thumbs up if any of these resonate with you. The themes over here that I saw were, a few folks indicating that, a lot of the interim targets were easy to establish. Some of those around demand response were challenging. I'm guessing a lot of these come from our smaller utilities that are primarily BPA customers, and that makes sense. That would be more challenging for them than for others. The other theme here that I see is leans away from the energy side per se and focuses more on the equity elements in the CEIP. That shouldn't be a surprise. I think we all should recognize that the Clean Energy Transformation Act is the first state law to require a lot of equity elements of utilities, and therefore this work is new to a lot of folks, and it's new work nationally even. So that shouldn't be a surprise. This is a challenge for folks, and that this is an area for growth. The folks noted that they often are struggling with coming up with a lot of the data for identifying customers and tracking progress for customer work on equity measures, trying to figure out how specific to be in specific actions and indicators and measuring progress after establishing those actions and indicators would be a challenge. Around equity. And so I do think we'll spend a lot of our time thinking about how to best do that work and then what is feasible now that we're looking back at the plans and realizing what in the ideal scenario we would do and what we would do based on where we sit today. I think that'll probably be a fair discussion here and theme throughout this work. I also see in that equity bucket I see one sticky note, but it's one that I've seen a lot from utilities about trying to get households engaged. The sticky note here says common persons, and that might be true. I'd also add, vulnerable populations and highly impacted communities. How do we just do outreach and community engagement well? What does that look like? I'm not sure how much we will see that translate into the interim and performance reports, but I do think, looking forward at the next clean energy implementation plan, that's something for folks to be thinking about. Finally, I see in here another bucket around just staffing, timeline, the human resources element needed to do this work and do this work well. Again, I think that probably varies a great deal across our utilities. And I think that's why there's some flexibility built into our rules and into the law that accommodates utilities of different sizes and varying levels of ambition on this work. So, and resources. So those were the themes that I saw across these two. I definitely would open it up the floor to see if anyone else had anything else to add or if they see something different or different amounts of emphasis on different pieces here. Well, you guys are all too kind if you think I summarized this really well. Or if you're just, anything that particularly resonates with anyone or doesn't resonate with folks. Not to take away from what somebody said, but maybe provide a different perspective based on where you sit as a utility or the staff. I see Aaron's doing some sorting here for us, which is nice, and I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Austin, I can offer a comment on the staffing, and you kind of already, well, my name's Kelly Dingle. I'm from Avista. I wasn't involved in our first CEIP. I came on the scene after it was approved, and you mentioned it with like the smaller PUDs that are on this call, or at least one, and they have a lot less staff than an Avista, and Avista has a lot less staff than a PSE. But yet we're all required to, perform the same documentation or the same amount of information. And it is a lot to do all of these things. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do them. I'm just saying how can we streamline a process so it doesn't have to be as labor intensive. So, I mean, wouldn't it be all nice if we had enough employees like PSE? Wouldn't it? It'd be so nice, right? But we're still struggling with getting someone dedicated to support CBIs, right? Just help us get there. So I feel for the smaller utilities that are not that they're struggling with a lot more to
Yeah.
accomplish.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Kelly, and um, I think I'm picking on Stephen now after hearing that we've really good at shoveling, and thinking there's probably a few more of them there too. That we all wish we had more staff, just even if they come over and help us shovel sometimes. But in terms of the workload too, and I'm sure PSE also, wishes it had more staff as well, given their bigger service territory and everything else. And I think that's, just something that keep in mind as we go through this work is one way that we can try and our best as a group is to just share the knowledge that we can with one another. That's one way of in a way getting more knowledge and having more staff and thinking through these things together. Can't do the work per se, but maybe help lay out a process or bounce ideas off the wall about how to do this stuff most efficiently and effectively. And there will be, I think built into the rules themselves, there's differences in terms of what the IOUs are held to in this work and what the COUs are held to. The IOUs, as I understand it, they've got multiple indicators, multiple actions that they must have for each indicator under IOU rules. And under commerce rules, they only have to, if I recall correctly, have one indicator. I don't know if there's a requirement for, there certainly isn't a requirement for a certain number of specific actions for each indicator, but it's a lot less than what the IOUs have. Nonetheless, we can learn a lot. And, one thing we'll struggle with perhaps, maybe not in this group, but as we look out towards, making this available to everyone is that there's even different lexicons. Customer benefit indicator is a foreign word to a lot of the consumer-owned utilities, since we don't even use that term in our conversations with COUs, not for any particular reason, just that it kind of developed out of the conversations that the UTC was having with IOUs. So I hope that together we can work to help shed some light on that. I also know the IOUs will have a lot more reporting to do to the UTC on how they did over this 4-year performance period, and Commerce is by no means trying to replicate that. If anything, we kind of want to get a streamlined reporting process where utilities that are reporting the UTC don't have to do much, if anything, other than fill out the reporting template with the information they're already providing to the UTC. There might be a few places where they differ because we want to have a rather uniform analysis, at least on some of the major pieces, so that we can aggregate everything properly. But we don't want to add to that workload and want to be cognizant of staffing requirements across utilities, even the big ones. Because I think reporting is not the primary goal here. It's delivering the work to the customer. And we might learn a lot as we do the reporting and think about it, and that's beneficial, but reporting for reporting's sake is not. All right, I think, Aaron, we're ready to move on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for participating in that exercise. So now we'll go over to this bottom half, the yellow and blue part. And I'll give you guys independent brainstorm time again. So on the left side, the yellow part is what ideas do you have? What ideas do you have to address the identified challenges? What are potential solutions to the challenges identified? How should we accommodate for challenges in the previous CEIP? And then how should we take action as a blue side? What do you believe we should do next? What should extend beyond this meeting? How can you support the development of the reporting template? So go ahead and take 5 minutes again, 5 to 10 minutes, and individually brainstorm, and then we'll go ahead and discuss as a group again. Set this time. One quick thing I want to clarify is this section on the bottom half is all referring to the CETA performance and compliance reporting. So this would be reporting on your prior 4 years of performance based on what you wrote in your previous CEIP. Just wanted to clarify that. How are folks doing? Do we need a few more minutes? Let's give it a couple more minutes, just so people can review what other people have put down and add on or thumbs up things. If you have ideas for, it might be helpful to look at the challenges that we put down in the pink section and think about how do we address those challenges for CETA performance and compliance reporting, and see if we can draw a connection there. I'll give a couple more minutes and then we'll convene to discuss.
Hey, Erin.
these comments in yellow, they're, you know, the comments about the map and the CBIs are really from Avista. And we, you know, I know you were like, wait a minute, this isn't quite the right audience, you know, venue to be talking about these things. But if we can't change the past and how it's been created, but we're trying to make an improvement on how to report about it into the future. But if we don't get like alignment on some of these things that I put on the sticky notes, then it's hard to fix it in a report. I mean, reporting the data is one thing, getting intelligent and insightful data is another thing. So
Yeah, and so it sounds like the DOH maps for the highly impacted communities were changed.
yes. And then if you're changing the map, you're changing the data set, which means you're changing your base, you're adjusting from the baseline. And so you inherently have mismatched your data. So it's hard to pinpoint, well, where's the improvement? Was it all the new population you brought because you added 25,000 people to the mix? Or did some action you take actually benefit the population? But you wouldn't know it because you know, added so many people when you took an update. It's more of a comment for how to fix it in the CEIP, but this isn't how to fix the CEIP. You know, what kind of guidance can you improve on for the CEIP? It's more, hey, you've got to do this report, and how can we make the reporting on that a little bit easier, but we can't change the past.
Yeah.
So if you want to throw out my sticky notes, I won't be offended.
Well, I guess this is relevant to reporting on the impact that you had in the highly impacted communities. And yeah, I think on the UTC side, you guys have much more detailed reporting and tracking on this front. I'm curious if you guys have had discussions about this, or if you have any suggestions for how to address this issue.
We haven't particularly had one about the CBIs, the data behind the CBIs, or the identification of named communities on the map.
Okay.
I personally think, Kelly, it's a good flag to think about these differences, and you know that these are really good comments for things we'll have to figure out. I think we'll want to sync up to the extent we can with the UTC on this particular issue. And make sure that we have a kind of uniform approach so people don't have to, if the IOUs don't have to do two different approaches. To me, my inclination is to, you know, if you base your map on the first version, if you can use the first version, that would be the most apples to apples comparison. You know, and then you know, your next plan is going to be based on the new version of the DOH tool, would be my thought. You know, the one to me that Aaron's comment most resonated with me in terms of the sticky notes is the one about utilities being able to choose from CVIs and Commerce's new guidance materials. Like, I don't know, it seems to me that we'll, you know, the utility has its indicators and specific actions that it set forth 4 years ago. I think there's maybe some wiggle room around how those are characterized, maybe how some of those are written, because there is some ambiguity there from one indicator to another, and one specific action the utility were to adopt. And one way you might measure it, if the measurement criteria isn't very good, is to, you know, perhaps look at that guidance and say, oh yeah, we could measure it this way. But you're still going to have to look at, you know, exactly what you came up with 4 years ago. And, you know, if you end up saying, the way we proposed measuring it or the way we wanted to do it back then wasn't really the best approach. We can't really measure it for X, Y, and Z reasons. So, we did look at it this other way, and here's the data we learned from that. Like that would be something, maybe we need to build in with the template, et cetera, just because, the template needs to acknowledge that we're learning as we go. At the same time, the utility is legally required to respond to what it put in the plan 4 years ago, so we can't create anything whole cloth. But it might be helpful. So to me, that was the one that I was left thinking about, whether we're talking about CEIPs or talking about the performance. And in any case, I think we can learn something from the conversation.
Yeah, I made that comment because as Austin said, we can't just throw out the last CEIP that folks wrote. This is the performance and compliance reporting, and so maybe we can accept minor revisions, but I don't think we can wholesale just like throw out the last CEIP and have folks like make up new indicators or specific actions. Maybe they could follow the guidance that was provided in the new CEIP document to like try and make some minor revisions to make things more clear. But these utilities should have taken actions over the past 4 years, and I think it would be acceptable to follow the new guidance to make sure it's more specific, more clear, but not necessarily like throw out everything and make up new ones. So I think that would be acceptable, and where utilities have struggled to find data that they've established, I think there's some good suggestions here. Develop a repository of resources. I think the investor-owned utilities have dedicated more resources and have had more resources to look into this. If they'd be willing, if there are utilities, I'd be willing to share these resources or potential data sources for certain metrics that they've been using for tracking that might be helpful. Because there was a data tracking challenge. There have been challenges with some of the data availability and some of the metrics that were used. So being able to share those resources could be really helpful. I see here, have a space for utilities to ask questions, share useful information. Commerce or UTC could host a webinar in which IOUs or other utilities who didn't struggle with determining the cost scenario could show their methodology. I think this one is under kind of data tracking resources.
Aaron?
Mhm.
A question. Were you thinking folks were gonna fill this blue section out during the last period, or are they gonna get additional time? Because I think all of these were written after folks.
Yeah, I can give folks some more time. I was trying to I just combined them. But it looks like people started adding more things recently, so I can give some more time for folks to brainstorm the blue section too. Yeah, so this is, let's see, in the year 4 of the current CEIP, report current CEIP CBIs and take any updates for CBIs and re-baseline for the next CEIP.
That was another one of the Avista ones, more
Mhm.
about changing or establishing something for the CEIP, not trying to change the past.
Okay.
So it's okay to delete it.
Oh, okay.
I was taking a different approach.
Okay, so this is like, I'm just gonna say this is, yeah, you guys, I think the investor-owned utilities have had to have much more frequent reporting. So, investor-owned utilities have to report annually and biannually, progress updates. So I'm just labeling this IOU specific, because, the COUs have not had to do, frequent, progress updates. So that's applicable to investor-owned utilities. It says, so I think in terms of the suggestion here, it sounds like is, would Avista, would your recommendation be to take the most recent progress report, or, your most recent, biennial CEIP update, and take the CBIs there and include that in this CETA performance and compliance reporting?
Yes, we would. And right now, Avista and maybe other utilities are in this spot too, where you're faced with new data sets coming your way, or different choices on how you could treat the named communities population with DOH map updates. But we would like to stay on the current version, stay on the current CBI data set, so that we have a comparison of our baseline to our biennial to this compliance report, and not change the data set. But someone might say, but you should try to help all the people and be aware of all of the populations that are in your service territory. And we would want to say, well, we will when we do our next CEIP, and like to keep the data set consistent across the 4-year period, and not have to mix and match data sets from the baseline to the biennial to this report.
Yeah. So there you're talking again about the highly impacted communities. Are you talking
Yes.
about that, like using the original V1
Yep.
version? Okay.
Avista has not taken the map update for Department of Health.
Okay.
No. But again, those impact this reporting. They also impact your CEIP, and Avista will be talking about this, and with people that are interested in our CEIP advisory group in due time. So I could be previewing more information.
Okay. I'm curious, as the UTC had a work group where you guys share resources for metrics and kind of things like that, for investor-owned utilities, if you guys have had a space like that.
Aaron, were you asking me that?
Yeah, yeah. I guess that was the first question.
Not that I'm aware of off the top of my head. I mean, not like posted by the UTC. I don't know if utilities have, gotten together separately, but yeah, not like a bigger workshop for CBIs, no.
And I know the UTC would sometimes host workshops for certain things, like DER discussions, performance-based rulemakings and stuff. So I wasn't sure. Have utilities had a space to share resources, just generally? I guess not just investor-owned utilities, but utilities in general. Have you guys convened and talked about resources for metrics or data to address these challenges with tracking CBI indicators, metrics, specific actions, etc.?
Yes, there have been conversations between Puget and PAC and Avista, most particularly about metrics and what an appropriate CBI should be, and how do you make it relevant to the utility? Like, what are your ideas? An example we all struggled with was indoor air quality. How does the utility affect that? And so we shared ideas where we could. Of course, we can't share data sources, but we could say this is where we got the data, in case they were struggling. We used to have an ongoing meeting, maybe once a month we met with them, but that was after our CEIP was approved and the others were on their way to approval. But we don't have that ongoing meeting scheduled anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been discussions across like private versus public utilities on data sources, and it sounds like there hasn't. But that sounds like a good idea to share data sources for difficult metrics that have been established. I'm curious if there are other metrics that people established in their last CEIP that they struggled with in particular, like besides indoor air quality. Deborah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, just question related to this. When we're talking about utilities sharing data with each other, are we talking internal data or are we talking about source data that we use for baselines and references? Like what's the scope of that data that we're talking about?
When I made the comment, we're not going to share our data sources, I'm thinking about proprietary information that's Avista service territory specific, or third-party data we specifically purchased to establish CBI metric tracking. We'll share the idea, but we're not going to share the data itself.
Got it. And so just to clarify then, so Commerce, when you're asking about utilities sharing data, is that the type of data you're meaning, or are you thinking more like the health disparities map and external resources that we might all use?
I think I'd be talking more along the lines of what Avista is talking about. Because the health disparities map is publicly available. I guess utilities could discuss that, but when I'm talking about it sounds like most utilities have been struggling more so with the metrics, tracking metrics, and where to get the data from. Like generally, I think that's more so what I'm referring to.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about, how you might compile and analyze census data, if that's useful, or any other data set that's publicly available. And then also the methodology behind using, internal data sources that a utility might have on hand. So it wouldn't make sense for getting privacy considerations. It wouldn't make sense for Avista to share its data analyzing, I don't know, let's just take indoor health metrics with somebody else because it's particular to their customers. But what might be helpful is if somebody has come up with an innovative way of measuring, and the methodology behind that work may be useful to other utilities, but it might not, because utilities might have different metrics and different actions as well. But to the extent that which we can come together and share ideas and talk through ideas in this forum would be great. I think one thing, in the blue that we will, be working on, as well as the performance template, but is also guidance for navigating the performance review to the extent that we can come together with best practices, it'd be good to put those up as shared guidance that will be a working document for everyone. Yeah.
So this is Tara from Grace Harbor. Well, I understand the discussion is supposed to kind of focus on what we did in the last interim period and how we might be able to make things better. We unfortunately, just given our staffing and so forth, it's going to be really difficult to report on anything for the last period. Well, not anything, but especially where the energy assistance piece comes from, because that's where a lot of our metrics aren't established. We don't have the data, we don't have the technology in place at this point to be able to do some of those things. Some of the tools that we previously had used are no longer available. And so really my comments on there were, I kind of have to look at the next interim period and what do I need to do now ahead of time and ahead of the game to make sure that we're going to be successful the next go round as well. And so one of the things that we did was developed it's kind of a regional group of COUs to come together to talk about, hey, how are you doing? What technologies are you using? So it really is a resource group, not necessarily the specific data, but if they're already doing something that's working well, and it worked really well to establish their methodologies for the tracking or progress, being able to document that, that's kind of what we're using each other for. If you went out and were really successful going out doing community engagement with different entities, what did that look like? What did your presentation look like? And we can share those things out to them, personalize those. That's one way we've used it, but also just talking to them about the technologies that they're using to track certain things, because a lot of us have the same systems, they're just not all being used the same way, and we may not know that there's aspects available. So that was something that was really helpful. And just those conversations we've had the last few months will help us do this last interim report for the previous cycle. So that's kind of how we've done it. It was something that myself and somebody from Lewis County put together. There's about 7 utilities that are all like size. So that's kind of helpful for some of our smaller to mid-sized utilities. That's kind of how we're using it. And what I meant by my comments of establishing that resource group.
Sounds good. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm glad you guys have been able to establish a group to share resources amongst each other with. There any other comments on ideas to address the challenges that we have identified here? It sounds like we've have ideas for data slash technical questions. And there are some, I guess the data piece connects with the indicators and metrics. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on this?
A thought that kind of resonates some of my comments on here on like holding something like office hours or something is just because we too are going to struggle to report on some of the indicators that we identified based off of the data that we thought we had. And so I think as we're compiling all of that information to report on it for next year, I would appreciate having like a sounding board to make sure like worst case scenario, we absolutely cannot get this data. What's the next best thing? But like ideally, like just kind of working through with us to figure out, like, you know, creative solutions, I guess, on some of these, because I do anticipate us struggling on some of them.
I'll just add that having looked at the reports, and then I think, you know, I've done a lot more work on the energy assistance side with the utilities, and hearing what they, in the energy assistance conversations, what data they have and do not have, and then looking at the CEIPs, I've often wondered how they're going to report under the CEIP based on what they're telling me they do not have in the energy assistance conversations. And I think there's also other areas where that's true, where folks had either high aspirations or, you know, were picking metrics that didn't align with the data that they had on hand. And I think, I don't know how, you know, folks will look at that from like a audit compliance perspective, but from a reporting perspective, from a policy perspective, I think, and from the performance report template perspective, I think there needs to be a kind of an acknowledgement there of, hey, we didn't have this data, or, you know, this thing didn't materialize. Here's a little bit of an explanation of why, and you know, I think you could include in this a little part where you say, you know, going forward, we're gonna get this data, or we're gonna do a different approach. We're working on it, figuring out what that approach is. That sort of thing would be helpful to tell the story of what's going on, because I don't think it is, you know, I don't think it's all too successful to try and rehash a lot of it if you don't have it. Now, if you have it, and it's just going to take a lot of effort to pull that data together, it's just going to take a whole lot of effort to pull that data together, and you should do that. And again, this is all from a policy perspective. It's not from a compliance perspective. You'll have to talk to the state auditor about that. But I do think, to me, that's kind of the difference in thinking about this performance report now and thinking about the CEIPs that you're suddenly going to be launching. You know, you can learn as you go on both. But then also thinking about, as you set out your thinking about your CEIPs, knowing you're going to have a performance report in 2030, you know, the performance report in 2030 should mirror somewhat what the CEIP looks at, because the way Aaron has set it up and the way this group has been working on that CEIP template, at least for the COUs, should lend itself very nicely to measurement and tracking and guiding you through these different questions. So, in thinking about the reporting template, I guess this is just one issue that we'll need to flag, where we're not going to have an ideal situation in which everything lines up perfectly. You know, even in the case of like Clark PUD would be my example, just because I don't think they necessarily did anything wrong. In it, they just, when they set out to write their CIP, they were very interested in small modular nuclear reactors. And 5 months later, they realized, when they came to present on their CIP, that that conversation didn't develop the way they had thought, and they were going to scrap that specific action. They weren't pursuing it anymore. So they already knew that. And so providing a place where they can explain that in the reporting template will be important. And you might have similar, very different variations on that. So, but I do think it's important to respond to everything that you put in the CEIP. You just might not be able to respond to it with the same level of rigor that you initially thought. And from a policy perspective, it's important to learn from that. So.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. Again, we're not regulators. We're not the UTC. We're not the auditor. And we can't speak for them. But we can try and have these discussions and kind of put you along the right path. But we can't definitively say whether or not you'll pass their sniff test for compliance or not, unfortunately. Oh yeah, Kelly.
Question. And this is because I wasn't around the first time and maybe I missed some of the introduction. But what it sounds like is that the PUDs and the investor owned, they have two different ways of how to do the CEIP. Avista has a 200-page document with every attachment you could imagine. And then the PUDs had a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. And those two things are going to continue into the future. But when it comes to this report, both have to complete it. And you're trying to make sure that the requirement for the IOU and the requirement for the PUD is the same requirement, the same template, the same everything. Is that what we're trying to get to?
Yeah, so this will be a high level summary. If you look at the rules for investor-owned utilities, it's actually much more detailed. You guys are required to report like hourly data. There's much more extensive reporting in the rules for investor-owned utilities, but all utilities are required to follow the statute of CETA. So the gist of CETA is ensuring an equitable clean energy transition, and the details of the reporting requirements differ between investor-owned utilities and consumer-owned utilities. So I've looked at the rules for investor-owned utilities and consumer-owned utilities, and there is overlap. The investor-owned utilities just have more to report to the UTC. And the idea of this is probably just going to be much more simplified, high level, less detailed kind of report for investor-owned utilities. So it'll basically be a summary of what you're going to report to the UTC without all these details about hourly data and ensuring prudency and whatnot. Do folks want to add on more to how we should take action? Like, I guess this space has kind of become like next steps, thinking farther into the future. And it sounds like we have some ideas for thinking about the next CEIP early, or using this compliance reporting to start thinking about how they can improve tracking metrics and improving their CEIP for the next cycle. Do folks have other ideas here? Or do folks have ideas for how they can support the development of the reporting template, or provide resources for like data tracking resources, methodologies? Yeah. I'm curious, Kelly, would the investor-owned utilities be okay with sharing some of the methodologies and tools they've used for data tracking on certain metrics with COUs? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, we could share. Obviously, there's tons of databases and tons of, detail behind it, but the methodology we have documented. So yes, we would be happy to share that.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not sure what step in the process COUs are at, if that would be more helpful for the next cycle versus the current cycle. But yeah, that might be a helpful resource for COUs.
It would also be helpful to, I can't speak to how many true metrics are behind all of the CBIs or whatever customer metrics they've adopted. But Vista has 78 we're tracking, 78 individual metrics. And if you want to make reasonable sense of those, it'd be nice if there was a way to sum up the data so someone could look at it without, scrolling through 5 pages of just numbers. How do you make the data meaningful in the report instead of just numbers on a page? And if people are interested in numbers on a page, we can do that. We can do numbers on a page. But if the report is more intended to be more meaningful, then I'd want to know, like, how would you like the CBI metric data presented? And this just provided a Excel spreadsheet with numerous tabs. It was accepted, but I don't know if that's what people are looking for.
I think when I envision what's required in statute is for both the IOUs and COUs to submit the information that we summarize on this mural board on the left-hand side of the Post-its here. And Aaron walked through some of those requirements in the PowerPoint. That's what's required of Commerce for us to get those. There's no requirement that we report anything to the legislature on this, but knowing that the legislature is going to ask us, how are the COUs and IOUs doing? It's helpful to be able to think about being able to aggregate the information fairly cleanly. I think it's really clean to aggregate information in terms of, what was your percent renewables over the 4-year period? What was your percent of conservation? How much conservation was acquired? It's much more difficult to summarize, how are we all doing on this or that equity metric? Because first of all, not everyone has the same equity metrics. We don't, as well as specific actions. I think what we can say, though, will be something around what we already know, which is that IOUs have a broader set of metrics. This is what they're doing. Some of those are working really well. Some of them are like indoor air quality, might need to be refined. The COUs, many of them have more limited metrics. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. That sort of thing. And to the extent that there's some consistency there, we can note it. To the extent that there's inconsistency, we can note it. But those will be much higher level. And what we'll do is, everyone's going to be on their own journey based on, what their community is looking for, everything else. So there's not really a judgment there or a need for uniformity. In fact, it's probably good if folks are taking different approaches to those issues. And I don't expect us to try and summarize those results. But to the extent that we can capture the information in a relatively similar way so that folks can look at them, relatively at a high level, that would be great. But we are not going to be able to capture everything at the granular level. That's really what the individual utility reports are for. And so I guess my point is, I think I see where you're coming from, Kelly, in terms of, we've done all this work and we've captured it at this level and we can't capture that in numbers. And I don't think we plan to capture the equity pieces totally in numbers in an aggregate report. We just want to be able to look across and observe some things that I think qualitatively we can quantify, such as these are the metrics people are using. Maybe it makes sense to make these more consistent going forward, and further guidance would help with that or not help with that. Those would be more of the things we're looking at. And I think being deferential to the big utilities or the folks who choose to write up their longer reports and submit them, et cetera, on those elements, it is good. So we're not trying to provide the definitive account. We're just trying to provide the high level summary of where people are at with this work.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, Austin brought a good point up there. And yeah, that's something we haven't talked about too much, is how we're going to aggregate the results. And maybe on the template, we could have a categorization of the specific actions, metric goals as achieved, not achieved, or indeterminate. And that could allow Commerce to say at a high level, like what % of the specific actions have been completed, which ones are, or which metrics are, need work, like which ones do utilities actually have to like find data sources for, versus which ones did they accomplish kind of their targets for, if they had targets established. That might be helpful on a high level to be able to talk about.
And I think, again, to be able to summarize that and note inconsistencies or indeterminate, like progress on this, or a lot of progress, not a lot of progress. I don't think, like comparing this work to what we've done in energy assistance, where we're, really seeing a lack of increase in participation for some utilities and not others, and been pretty, looking at it saying we really need to find ways to increase this. With the CEIPs, I really do think we're going to look at the CEIPs and just observe and note that, this is the first time that we're really, unlike energy assistance programs, which most utilities have had around for a long time and had different requirements on. These CIPs are really new. The establishing indicators, tracking these things are really new. What can we collectively learn together? How can we support one another going forward? And so I think just being able to report on these things is a big success. And, just doing some gap analysis is really helpful for everyone and figuring out what we need. We kind of did that when we did the workshop series, just through conversations with the COUs and then bringing the IOUs into this work and realizing, wow, there is a lot here that we could be doing that we didn't think individually about, even, from Commerce's perspective as well as from the utility perspective. And so identifying those and, is there a way going forward that everyone can work together better on, or maybe, there's need for additional assistance in this, that, or the other thing to help utilities do the work equitably and that sort of thing. But I don't see this as, oh my gosh, folks didn't do X, Y, and Z exercise. It's really a really big learning exercise here. So.
Very good. Any other last thoughts before I wrap up? Well, I guess one follow-up item is I might reach out to Kelly of Vista to kind of inquire about what data sharing might look like. If there's like a cheat sheet you guys have, maybe that could be shared with COUs. Yeah, and I'll have to think more about, you know, what that collaboration looks like. I'm not sure if Commerce has the capacity to host kind of data sharing and resource sharing kind of groups, but at least maybe we could provide that connection, that initial connection. Okay, well, thank you all for joining today. Next steps is we'll come up with a rough draft for next month for us to discuss during our meeting. And we'll share that with you and we'll move on from there. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.